If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Birds aren't real. Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conspiracy Vault. In case you weren't sure if you misheard me, I said it. Birds aren't real. A relatively new conspiracy that claims to have been around for decades. A theory that claims all living birds across America were killed in a mass genocide and replaced with artificial, robotic versions that look and sound exactly like the birds you and I see every day. Unless you're in the States, of course. I'm about to tell you the story as it is told on the Birds Aren't Real website.
The message of the movement is essentially to spread awareness that from 1959 through 2001, the government mercilessly genocided over 12 billion birds and simultaneously replaced them with surveillance drones in disguise that film us every day as equally as these cameras are filming us right now.
That was Peter McIndoe, the face at the front of this conspiracy who merely claims to be a spokesperson for the wider truth. He spoke with WREG News Channel 3. On his website, he lays out this timeline. On July 11, 1947, the CIA was founded. According to the CIA.gov website, like all government agencies, the CIA was not created overnight and functioning at full capacity the following morning. In fact, there were various renditions of an intelligence agency for 6 years prior to the formal establishment of the Central Intelligence Agency. At the beginning of World War II, America's first peacetime, non-departmental intelligence organization was created. That organization moved and morphed and changed names and ownership. It was dissected and dismantled before President Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947, creating a permanent Central Intelligence Agency. According to History.com, on July 26, 1947, President Harry S. Truman signs the National Security Act, which becomes one of the most important pieces of Cold War legislation. The Act established much of the bureaucratic framework for foreign policy making for the next 40-plus years of the Cold War. By July 1947, the Cold War was in full swing. The United States and the Soviet Union, once allies during World War II, now faced off as ideological enemies. In the preceding months, the administration of President Truman had argued for and secured military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey to assist in their struggles against communist insurgents. In addition, the Marshall Plan, which called for billions of dollars in US aid to help rebuild war-torn Western Europe and strengthen it against possible communist aggression, had also taken shape. As the magnitude of the Cold War increased, however, so did too the need for a more efficient and manageable foreign policy-making bureaucracy in the United States. The National Security Act was the solution. The National Security Act had three main parts. First, it streamlined and unified the nation's military establishment by bringing together the Naval Department and the War Department and establishing the Department of the Air Force, all under a new Department of Defense. The DoD would facilitate control and utilization of the nation's growing military. Second, the Act established the National Security Council, or NSC. Based in the White House, the NSC was supposed to serve as a coordinating agency sifting through the increasing flow of diplomatic and intelligence information in order to provide the President with brief, detailed reports. Finally, the Act set up the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA replaced the Central Intelligence Group, which had been established in 1946 to coordinate the intelligence-gathering activities of the various military branches of the Department of State. The CIA, however, was to be much more. It was a separate agency, designed not only to gather information, but also to carry out covert operations in foreign nations. The Birds Aren't Real movement believes that the CIA was in fact founded to survey and set up 24-hour surveillance on American citizens. For 5 years, the government worked on getting CCTV established throughout the land. By the 50s, there was the threat of communism still hanging over the government, and the CIA wasn't doing enough to settle nerves. In 1951, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were arrested. These were American citizens who were sentenced to execution after being accused of providing American intel to the Soviets and being involved in espionage. This caused some controversy as they were the only couple to receive the death penalty over this type of crime at the time. Julius Rosenberg was allegedly almost positively guilty. The same could not be said for Ethel, yet in 1953 they were executed. This only furthered the worries about the Soviets and, according to this movement, the need for CCTV. In the same year, Alan Dulles became the director of the CIA. Britannica.com says Alan W. Dulles, in full Alan Welsh Dulles, was born the 7th of April 1893 in Watertown, New York. And he was a US diplomat and intelligence expert who was director of the Central Intelligence Agency during its early period of growth. This movement stresses how Alan Dulles wanted mass CCTV everywhere. And on April 15th, 1956, he allegedly met with President Eisenhower to get what he wanted: cameras in the sky. Apparently, Eisenhower liked this idea. He said yes, and he told the first director of the CIA, Alan Dulles, to come up with a plan and get back to him. According to the Birds Aren't Real movement, a secret meeting took place in 1956 in the Oval Office, where the official plan was made. In this meeting, it was agreed that 12 billion birds would be killed and replaced with robots. This would also benefit the higher-ups in the CIA who hated birds and hated finding bird poo on top of their cars. So killing the birds and replacing them with robots was almost like killing two birds with one stone, so to speak. Between 1959 and 1971, the Great Culling apparently occurred. On May 6, 1957, Dulles allegedly met with an unidentified man from the Boeing Company, where he placed an order for 120 B-52 bombers. According to the Boeing website, the Boeing B-52 primarily provides the United States with immediate nuclear and conventional global strike capability. The B-52 is the most combat-capable bomber in the US inventory. Due to its high mission-capable rate, large payload, long range, persistence, and ability to employ both nuclear and conventional precision standoff weapons, the B-52 continues to be a critical contributor to the US national security strategy. It would take 2 years for engineers to build 120 of these planes. Once they were built, they were supposedly transferred to Area 51, who could modify these into B-52Bs. The second B stood for bird. The aircraft were apparently painted matte black, equipped with noise reduction technology, had tracking equipment planted in the nose of the plane, and could fly completely silently up to altitudes of 3,000 feet. Each bomber was equipped with 450-gallon water tanks. What happened to the engineers that built these planes? Well, according to the Birds Aren't Real website, they were all dismissed of their duties and allowed to return home. Only shortly after leaving Area 51, they were ambushed and sent to the front lines of the Vietnam War, only to be kidnapped by the Viet Cong and then never heard from again. On June 2, 1959, Operation Water the Country supposedly began, an operation I couldn't find any information about online, but this marked the start of birds being poisoned from 8,000 feet using the water tanks mixed with toxins, killing the birds and causing them to deteriorate at rapid rates within 24 hours, leaving no evidence or trace behind. In 1976, the operation was renamed to Operation Very Large Bird. It wasn't allowed to be called Big Bird because of copyright reasons. And in the years 1976 to 1982, allegedly 15% of the entire US bird population was killed. Uninformed pilots were supposedly tasked with watering the country using the B-52Bs. While the birds were dying, the CIA supposedly released early bird prototypes. These were robotic prototypes of flightless birds. On October 2, 1963, JFK allegedly overheard a conversation between CIA members, including Alan Dulles. This included the discussion of 220 million dead birds. And by October 25, 1963, JFK was presented with the X-500 Turkey prototype, a robotic bird that specialized in killing large birds like eagles and falcons. He was informed of the plan to replace all birds and said he was on board, but eventually he would change his mind and call the operation off. A month later, on November 22nd, JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. According to Birds Aren't Real, not a single president has opposed the bird massacre plan since. The movement goes on to say that on July 2, 1964, there was a secret meeting held in the Jefferson Building in Washington, D.C., where the CIA discussed the need to replace birds they had killed in mass quantities in the next 30 days, otherwise the citizens of America would begin to notice. And then in August 1964, in response to an alleged attack by North Vietnamese patrol boats on US destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin, the US Congress authorized President Lyndon B. Johnson to take any action necessary to deal with threats against US forces and allies in Southeast Asia. According to Birds Aren't Real, the attack by the Vietnamese torpedo boat was faked as a way to place troops in Vietnam. Why? Well, apparently it was for their precious bauxite ore, the key element for the mass aluminium required to make millions of robotic birds. According to this movement, Vietnam had some of the largest reserves of bauxite ore on the planet. So from 1964 to 1975, there was a war raging against America and Vietnam, where specialists were extracting the ore and were taking it to hundreds of facilities around America to make these robotic birds. Using the fear of nuclear war to justify creating underground bunkers, the CIA put hundreds of employees to work across 22 of these bunkers, making up to 100,000 birds a day. Each bunker would focus on a different breed of bird. For example, according to Birds Aren't Real, Colorado made hummingbirds in their bunker because the primary backyard bird of Colorado is the hummingbird. The Birds Aren't Real website then gives us a quick fact about hummingbird robots. They are handy for the CIA to spy on people through hard-to-reach places because they are small. But who made these birds? 100,000 a day and hundreds of employees. How has nobody ever come forward to speak about this operation? Well, apparently, it was everyday people in the 60s and 70s, most who were going out to party. Those who were involved allegedly recall being offered some acid at a disco or a party or a nightclub, and then, during their acid trip, were led to a weird underground factory where they spent days at a time making robots. In 2001, the last bird apparently died in America, and then, just weeks after the attacks of September 11, 2001, Congress passed the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act, the USA Patriot Act, a way to help the government detect terrorism earlier by essentially spying on its own citizens. Now the government are allowed to keep a watchful eye over the American people. The CIA had finally succeeded in what they set out to achieve in 1959. Now, some believe that COVID is being used as a ruse, so that the birds can all be recharged, but Peter McIndoe on the Birds Aren't Real YouTube channel, in a video called Quarantine Official Statement, comes forward with epic Jurassic Park theme music playing in the background, and tells his followers, all 7.6 thousand subscribers on his channel, that the government aren't using quarantine to replace the batteries in the bird drones, because the birds are rechargeable. They don't use mainstream batteries. They use power lines to recharge their batteries, and there has been power line maintenance going on around us this whole time. When I visited the Birds Aren't Real website, it brings up essentially an online clothing store. It's labelled as Activism Apparel, with plenty of merch donning the logo and slogan Birds Aren't Real, and each item of clothing costs a minimum of $25. Is this just an extremely clever marketing scheme, using meme culture and online echo chambers to create a false conspiracy and make a ton of money? There is more information on the website, and I wanted to read a part of it as it is written on the website so you can get a true feeling for the nature of this conspiracy. It says, "If you have made it this far, I thank you. I thank you for your decision to learn the truth and seek justice for the innocent birds that were taken from us. I have one more subject to discuss. A parting gift, if you will. The current state of the movement. As of this writing, it is August 2019. Donald Trump has used sophisticated tactics to keep our movement suppressed. He knows that he can't regulate the internet as well as he would like to. Google, Facebook, and Instagram are independent platforms being used by the government to track and compile data from the billions of drone birds cruising the skies all across America. Instagram has begun the process of censoring our message as they remove post after post. Other movements have sprung up all across the world, as millions of people fear that their government is also not to be trusted. While there is zero evidence to suggest that countries in Europe have enacted this process of removing birds and replacing them with robots, the fear is still alive, and for good reason. A common question that we get a lot is, how do the birds not fly out of the United States to Mexico or Canada? It's a great question. While the majority of the birds are programmed not to cross over to these countries, there are some that still venture into these countries for a few reasons: picking up drugs like cocaine and marijuana, for eventual delivery into the lower class segments of our major cities. The government will do anything they can to maintain control over its citizens, even getting them hooked on drugs. Another reason is simple: keeping tabs on US citizens who go on vacation. Any bird you see flying across the US border to either Mexico or Canada is simply tracking an American citizen who has travelled outside of the United States. However, there is currently nothing keeping a bird from Canada or Mexico from travelling inside America, which is why there will never be a 100% robot bird population. It will most likely hover around 95%, as birds are always flying in from our neighbouring countries. This may soon change, however. In 2016, President Trump announced that if he was elected, he would build a wall between Mexico and the United States. You may believe the mainstream media and Trump's lies when you hear that the wall was designed to keep illegal immigrants out of the United States, but that is false. The wall will actually be encapsulated with thousands of microwave guns that can track any bird entering the United States and shoot it with harsh microwaves, which destroy the bird's ability to fly and will leave it deceased in under a few hours. I hope this does not shock you too much. After all, if you've made it this far in the reading, your entire view of this country has been totally reframed. I hope you are able to join us in this fight for freedom. And if you still have questions about this movement, there's an entire frequently asked questions section on the website. Maybe this can fill in some of the gaps, so buckle in for this next part. What is this movement's purpose? The Birds Aren't Real movement exists to spread awareness that the US government genocided over 12 billion birds from 1959 to 2001 and replaced these birds with surveillance drone replicas, which still watch us every day. Once a preventative cause, our initial goal was to stop the forced extinction of real birds. Unfortunately, this was unsuccessful, and the government has since replaced every living bird with robotic replicas. Now our movement's prerogative is to make everyone aware of this fact. What do you mean birds aren't real? The term birds aren't real refers to biological birds no longer existing on United States soil. After the government forcibly made the entire species extinct in the 20th century, all of these birds were replaced with surveillance drones designed to look like real birds. To simplify, birds no longer exist in the US as a biological life form, thus birds aren't real. What are eggs? The eggs we see in the 21st century are specifically designed by the government to appear indistinguishable from what eggs once were, when birds were real. When the government replaced the species with robotic replicas, it was key that these replicas sustained the same activities that their biological predecessors did, including producing edible eggs. What is bird poop? Bird poop was originally thought to be oil discharge from earlier bird drone models. After further research, though, this was disproven. Bird poop irregularly falls on vehicles in large amounts. Recent studies show that 87% of bird poop in populated areas falls on people's cars. Why is this? Confidential documents leaked in 2018, revealing that bird poop is actually a form of liquidated tracking apparatus. If you walk outside and notice some bird poop just happen to fall on your car, be aware that you are now being tracked by the United States government. It is recommended that you clean your car exterior regularly to avoid this. How do you explain bird meat? All meat found in birds today is 100% synthetic. If birds suddenly become inedible, the government's entire scheme would have been compromised. In order for their transition from real bird to drone replica to make sense, they had to imitate all parts of real birds in their robotic copies. This includes tasty edible meat that's just synthetic. Synthetic meat is very accessible in modern times, with many fast food operations openly using it in their meals. The government simply had access to these modern technologies decades before the public. What about birds that people hunt and or roadkill? How do you explain bird guts? This entire question is based off of a flawed understanding of what a robot is. With major technological advances only recently being made in the 20th century, many still think that a robot can only be a metallic machine with gears and wires. Bird drones are not this. The government has access to futuristic technologies, making it possible to create a robot using parts indistinguishable from a biological organism. After all, if the robot replicas didn't look and feel exactly like real birds inside and out, the entire plot would be exposed. Where did all the birds go? Wouldn't people have seen them? Within the Birds Aren't Real movement, it is common knowledge that the government killed 12 billion birds before 2001 by releasing a virus that only affected the bird species. After the bioweapon was sprayed down from B-52B bombers, the virus spread throughout all birds like wildfire and made them all sick. The virus was designed to slowly disintegrate the birds and form an advanced leprosy. This is why there weren't 12 billion birds littering the ground of the nation as their robot counterparts were released into the public. They were disintegrated into dust, blown away with the wind. For every bird disintegrated by the virus, a robotic replica was put in its place. Are all birds robots? What about ones not primed for surveillance? When the government forcibly made the entire bird species extinct, they used a bioweapon, a controlled virus, to wipe out the entire species of bird in the United States. This virus could not be contained to only birds, who would be optimal for surveillance uses. It applied to the entire species. This means that every bird was affected, including chickens and other types of birds not typically in ideal environments for surveillance. I have a pet bird. What do I do? Not to startle you, but you have a highly advanced governmental surveillance drone in your house, watching your every movement, picking up every word of your conversations, and sending that data to the Pentagon. Pet birds were actually unheard of before 2001, when all birds became surveillance drones. At this time, the government started a propaganda campaign normalizing pet birds. If you think about it, a pet bird in a cage doesn't even make sense. The animals are supposed to have endless sky to explore, not to be held within a cage in a house. You would be best advised to not bring up any matters you'd prefer to remain confidential around your pet bird. Do different birds mean different things? Are they all surveillance drones? While most birds are designed specifically for public surveillance purposes, this does not mean that that is all the government is using them for. Bird drones can have multiple applications based on type. For example, vultures are not surveillance drones, they are used for public sanitation, like roadkill specifically. Another example is hummingbirds, which are used as assassination drones, spearing targets with their long needle beaks. Is this movement serious? Yes. The Birds Aren't Real movement has been active since 1976. Once a preventative cause, our initial goal was to stop the genocide of real birds. Unfortunately, this was unsuccessful, and the government has since replaced every living bird with robotic replicas. Now our movement's prerogative is to make everyone aware of this fact. I've encountered a bird in my life. What do I do? Should I be concerned? First, breathe. Remain calm. It is vital not to panic. And remember that this experience is not abnormal. These birds have likely been watching you for most of your life. Once you have regained your composure, look the bird straight in the eyes and declare the following statement confidently. I know your secret. I know that you are a surveillance drone in disguise. I know that behind those beady eyes are cameras, soaking up data and sending it to the Pentagon. I am on to you. I know you are not real. By vocally establishing dominance over the drone in this moment, your fear should subside, allowing you to remember that you are the human, and that is merely a robot. How important is the apostrophe in Birds Aren't Real? Can it be spelled Birds Aren't Real? Interesting question. The term birds aren't real is usable, but the apostrophe is important as it signifies more than just grammatical accuracy for our movement. It is legitimization. To us, the term birds aren't real without the apostrophe may lead people to think that we don't know what we're talking about. The term birds aren't real may immediately cause someone not to take us seriously. The term birds aren't real may lose our movement potential bird truthers. The spelling birds aren't real may delegitimize our movement as well. For without the apostrophe, it may look as if bird truthers are not educated. For us, birds aren't real without the apostrophe is very inadvisable. Always choose birds aren't real with the apostrophe. So there it is, guys. You can visit birdsaren'treal.com to read all of that information in more detail than what I've just provided you with. What do you think? Are birds real? Are birds not real? Are they really robotic surveillance drones? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker Casey, and this has been the Conspiracy Vault.